Word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we just ask for your guidance and your help. We ask that your Spirit would show us what you would have for us, Lord, in these passages as we do these examples. We want to learn these tools and become more adept at interpreting your word. But at the same time, I pray that you would speak to us through these passages, because each one of them has truth, life-giving truth. So let us receive the sermon from the passages and sharpen our skills at the same time. We ask this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. So we'll start right in with our next. We left off, we did up through plenary, so the one that I sent out in the email should have attributive as number 12 in the list. The attributive genitive, or the genitive of quality, is sometimes called. This one's easy. It's just you just translate it like an adjective. So when it's assigning a characteristic to the word being modified, and you can translate it like an adjective, then that's how it's taken, except it's generally considered stronger than an adjective. So they'll use an attributive genitive for emphasis. So on Luke 18:6, the judge of injustice, we call that the story of the unjust judge. Unjust is an adjective, but literally it's judge of injustice. Body of sin, Romans 6:6, sinful body. Who will transform the body of the humility? That's humble body. Or the body of his glory? That's glorious body in Philippians 3. Colossians 1:22, he reconciled you by the body of his flesh, his fleshy body. Words of his grace, gracious words, Luke 4. Acts 9:15, vessel of choice, chosen vessel. And then multiple passages, but Matthew 19:28, throne of his glory, glorious throne. A lot of times of glory ends up being like this, glorious. It's an attributive. King of the ages, eternal king. Okay, so that one's pretty straightforward. Any questions on that one? And by the way, anybody on Facebook Live, we should be live. I clicked on go live, right? So yeah. So if anybody's on Facebook Live, you can go ahead and type in questions on the comment thing, and hopefully I'll see them. If not, then just send me a text. So number 13, destination. Genitive of destination. The genitive indicates the direction in which the word modified is headed or is destined for. And so instead of, you can put to or toward or in the direction of or destined for in the translation. So in Matthew 4:15, it's literally the way of the sea, but it's translated the way toward the sea because it's a genitive of destination. Josiah begot Jeconiah during the deportation to Babylon, literally the deportation of Babylon, it's a genitive, and we translate it to Babylon because we're taking it as a genitive of destination. Hebrews 9:8, the way of the Holy of Holies, translate the way into the Holy of Holies. Who proclaim to you the way of salvation, the way toward salvation, a way that leads toward salvation. Romans 8:36, we are considered sheep of slaughter. Sheep, that's one of the destiny idea, sheep that are destined for slaughter. In Acts 16:17, they are proclaiming to you the way of salvation, the way that leads to salvation.
Yeah, I have a question about Matthew 1:11.
Okay.
He said that the Greek is deportation of Babylon.
Uh-huh.
That would translate deportation to Babylon.
Right.
When I think deportation of, I think of people leaving an area.
Okay.
And then when I think of to, I think I'm going to someplace.
Right. So if it were, so the genitive can be either one of those. So if it were the first one, if it were the deportation, like in English, if we said deportation of Babylon and we meant the Babylonians are being deported, what kind of genitive would this be? deportation of
Source.
Babylon.
From.
Deportation from Babylon.
So source, the genitive is the origin. Then it would be from Babylon.
Yeah.
If we think of it, so if it's source, then they're going from Babylon. If it's the Babylon, the city of Babylon is being deported. Actually, the word Babylon being put for the people, then we would maybe say subjective genitive, because the verb, implied verb is this deportation, and that's Babylon is, or no, objective. Babylon is being deported, but there's also such a thing as a attributed or a genitive of destination in the Greek, and so of Babylon, if they want to say you're deported to somewhere, they could just put the word to, but in this case they didn't. They just used the genitive of destination.
Well, see, here's a good case where if you didn't know, if you just had that one verse and you were looking at it and you picked the wrong genitive, you'd be telling a completely different story, would you not?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to know the context, or you wouldn't know that this is a genitive of destination if you don't know some theology. We're the same way in English. We'll use the word of in a lot of different ways that you wouldn't know what we're saying if you didn't have the context.
So how would you get the context, though, even in the first, the verse right above that, the way, if somebody said the way of the sea, that's totally different to me than the way toward the sea, because the way of the sea is, you're talking about, how the sea actually, what characteristics. I don't know how you would get that. The second one I would understand, yes, you could get that out of context. The first one, would context necessarily give you that?
Matthew 4:15, so we'll get the context. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea along the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles.
Yeah, it kind of gives you some direction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not talking about a characteristic of the sea. It's just trying to give a location there.
Even C to B is along the road by the sea.
Yeah. So all the translations take it as a destination.
So if you didn't know that...
oh, wait, they say by the sea. That wouldn't be destination.
Right.
The way by the sea would be what?
Near, close.
Have we studied that one yet?
It would be destined.
If it were one of the ones in our current list that we have, we'd have to just go with description. It's the way associated with the sea. I think there's a more specific one in the larger list. Let me just pull up the larger. Let's see here.
It could be reference. Could it?
Not just any way, but specifically the one by the sea. I don't know. I don't think I would make it. I would call it reference. I suppose it's possible, but
It's apposition.
the way, which is the sea.
Here we go.
Let's see, classes. There it is. I'll pull up the full grammar. Scan down through these real quick on the left side. Content, destination, telling, predicate, somewhere. Place. So the genitive of place, because that would be at the sea. Modal means, agent, cause, absolute reference, association, advantage, measurement. Yeah, I think it'd be, if we say along the sea, we just have to say description, because there's not a genitive that specifically means that. Okay, the But the deportation, all the readers are going to know that it was the Jews who were deported to Babylon, not the Babylonians who were being deported anywhere.
Yeah, deportation to me doesn't mean that. And then I read in the other versions, it's like, at the time of the exile to Babylon. Okay,
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on destination? Colt, could you grab me a cup of water real quick, please? Thanks. Okay, number 14, telic. The genitive denotes the purpose for which the word modified exists. Thank you. So, since that last one, or that direction one, can have the idea of destination, some people lump this in with destination. It's just kind of a figurative way of saying purpose. But let's look at this. Acts 14:27. He opened to the Gentiles an opportunity of faith, and we would call it a telic genitive, meaning the purpose of the opportunity was it was opportunity for the purpose of faith. Acts 27:34. This is of your deliverance. This is of your deliverance. And if we take it as a telic, then this is for the purpose of your deliverance. And so that's how it's translated there, for. Hebrews 12:17. He found no chance of repentance, chance for repentance. So typically with this, I didn't put it, but typically instead of the word of, you'll put for when it's a telic. Questions on that one? Okay. Number 15, comparison. Usually following some kind of comparative adjective, so it's easy to spot. Greater, literally it's greater of our forefather in John 4:12. Are you greater of our forefather Jacob? And everyone knows that means greater than. So immediately you see that as a comparison, genitive of comparison, and we translate it than instead of. He was earlier than I. A servant isn't greater of his Lord, greater than his Lord. The greatest of these is love. That one we would translate of because it's a superlative. That the testing of your faith, which is more precious of gold, is more precious than gold. So, any questions on comparison? That one's pretty straightforward. Content. When used literally, genitive denotes the content of the word modified. When non-literally, is more of a quality idea than quantity. So if it's modifying a noun, instead of, you'll put full of or consisting of. If it's modifying a verb, you put the word with. So they came dragging the net of fish. That's a genitive of content. The net is filled up with fish. It contains the fish. And so we could translate it, they came dragging the net full of or consisting of fish. Mark 9:41, whoever gives you a cup of water, cup full of water, cup consisting of water. John 6:13, they filled the baskets. Now that one it's a verb, so instead of full of, we'll use the word with. They filled the baskets with leftovers. So the baskets are filled up with the leftovers or the contents of the baskets. And Colossians 2:9, in him dwells all the fullness of deity. Fullness consisting of deity. So,
what would the genitive in John 6:13 there? Would that be a different ending to know that you're? Because doesn't that make it a dative genitive?
No, the dative is typically, if they're going to modify a verb, then it'll be a dative. But if it's but that's a whole different ending. So, but this is a genitive ending, so we know it's not a dative, it's a genitive. And so it's a genitive acting kind of like a dative.
I thought I saw even on the hub, the Bible hub, I thought I saw some that had, instead of an NG, they have DG. That's not the norm.
Oh, the G is genitive. The NG would be noun genitive. DG would be
Oh, it's not dative?
not dative, no.
Oh, okay.
No, it'd be something else.
Okay.
If you remember what verse, then we could look it up.
Actually, I think it was. Actually, I think I got it up on my. Yeah, I think it's Hebrews 1:3.
Oh, it's in Hebrews 1:3?
I think it's one that I saw the DGs, but I don't know. I was looking around. And,
Just happen to have Hebrews 1:3 up here.
but I was doing a lot of glancing around, so it's hard to tell. Oops. Yeah, I don't see any of
I
those.
think it's an article, is what it typically means.
I don't know. I don't know what D. I'd have to see it.
Yeah, but if I come across one, I'll kick it across to you because I was like,
Because typically, like when in the abbreviation, I believe the D second is a dative. So if it's DDSM, it's article dative singular neuter, I believe is what they call it. That's how they have it listed here. Yeah, if the D is second in that, then it typically is. If it's first, it's article. According to all, just I think this is the Strong's version here, though.
Huh. Okay.
Because A is aorist.
Aorist.
Aorist, yeah.
Yeah. So aorist, dative. Yeah.
Do you want me to hold off any questions on Hebrews 1?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Because I was seeing there in Bible Hub they've got himself marked as a genitive, and I'm like, what?
Okay.
And I'm like, why? Through himself. See, of the power through himself.
And wait a minute. Of the power by the of the power of himself. Okay, so right. Okay, so
by the word
right.
of the power through himself.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the word of the power of him or himself.
Right.
Right. And that is the genitive.
And I was like, when I was working on that, I was like, what genitive?
All right, let's look at it. Let's skip down to.
Sorry.
So we're ready to practice now. Anyway, we'll skip down to the homework since it sounds like you guys did it. So Hebrews 1:3. I've got that the last on your practice sheet.
Yeah.
So you're talking about this of him right here. Well, why don't we just do it in order? We'll start at the top of the verse. So the sun is the radiance of the glory. What'd you guys get for that one?
I landed on descriptive. I just got one.
Descriptive?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying it's not intended to be very limited in scope. He just wants to generally associate glory with radiance and not be any more specific than that. I think that's a real possibility. What did you say?
I said one as well.
Oh, you said, okay, descriptive. Anybody else get anything else?
I'm not sure why that couldn't be attributive.
Yeah, I think it could definitely be attributive. Glorious radiance. Remember we said of the glory is often attributive. So glorious radiance. The sun is the glorious radiance. Yeah, that's a possibility. Anything else?
Go that far.
I didn't look ahead.
You found one that worked, and then
It was in his notes when he said he sent it across. I don't know if that's the one that you mentioned was because you put it in your notes that one of them was.
No, that was
that's not the one. That's not the one.
So you thought it was you thought it was 12?
Yes.
1 and 2. Okay, so we got 1 and 12.
Any others? What about product? Product. The genitive is produced by the word modified. So actually not product, maybe production. It produces. So the glory produces the radiance. No? All right, thumbs down on that one. Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I thought maybe product, but definitely attributive is a possibility, or description. I really think if I had to pick one, I think I'd probably pick description. I really think this is one of the rare times where I would say, yeah, I don't think he's trying to be any more specific than that. He's just radiance and glory are almost the same thing. You know, if you wanted to, what would be wrong with apposition here? Radiance, which is the glory. Radiance and glory, pretty much, aren't they pretty close to the same idea?
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, I guess if you translate glory as his attributes being on display, and radiance, to me, it's lighting something up. So I guess
the word glory means shiny.
Yeah,
you know. So just on the real strict, literal definitions of the word, you could get away with apposition there. Sun is the radiance, namely the glory. And the exact representation of the nature. Representation of his nature. So what's nature?
The substance.
I hate to say it, but I guess apposition.
Use apposition?
Yeah.
I got 5 and 2. Let's see. Possessive and reference.
I didn't do very good on this.
I don't know why you got reference.
You know, I was looking at the wrong one. It's funny because it ended up being the same. Okay, so
Because what it's doing is it's representing specifically his nature.
Yeah. So the reference. So what did you say? I was totally looking at the wrong thing here. So what did you say for this one?
Well,
Did you apposition? Is that what you said?
yeah, I thought apposition.
Representation of the nature of representation, namely his nature. His exact representation, namely his nature.
Or 5 also reference with
Yeah.
respect
Reference.
to.
The representation specifically of his nature.
See, I got 2 as well because I was possessive.
Possessive?
Because
Well, that's the one that you were asking about the first time, of him. That would be possessive. His nature. So the of him is possessive, his nature. But I think, yeah, I put
I've got of him.
I put reference for nature.
So
Reference?
Yeah, I had that one as a
sun,
reference.
The sun, okay,
I
is
thought about
the
that, but-
glory, and that can be 1, 12, 4, and the exact representation of the nature.
Didn't you say possessive usually involved a person?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so of him.
So of him.
That's him.
Yeah, I
Of
was
his
just-
nature, yeah.
I was going back to Jared's.
Well,
of the
Jared, I
nature.
think he came up with that because he was doing of the nature of him together. Yeah, so.
Actually, I split it up because I put of the substance, but then I put of him. So that's definitely 2, but 5 and 2. 5 is reference. Yeah, so okay, so 5, all right, and then 2.
All right, sustaining all things by the word of the power.
Okay, hold on a second.
Oh.
So I was of him confused me too. I didn't even put anything down because I thought maybe it was connected with of the nature. So of him is modifying what?
Nature.
Nature?
Yeah. The nature of him.
Nature is modifying the representation.
Mhm.
Of him is
Modifying
modifying
Nature.
him.
Nature.
Of him, yeah, nature.
Right. So
So
genitive.
if you have a whole bunch of genitives, each genitive is modifying the genitive in front of it. Because
Typically.
I don't know if this would be appropriate to go through, but I looked at a verse I wanted to try out in the real world.
Yeah.
And half of the words in the verse was a genitive.
Ooh, let's look at that one. That one sounds fun. But in this case, it's definitely referring to the one right before it. The nature of him means his nature. But I don't know if I'm prepared to say every time it's always going to be the one right before. There might be cases where all the genitives refer back to one single noun. We'll have to look at the verse you got. But yeah, this one I would say it's definitely possessive. His nature.
So of nature is reference, and then of him is possessive?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Sustaining all things by the word of his power. Or I mean, of the power. Sustaining all things by the word of the power. The modifying word.
Yeah, throw this up here. What I wrote down here, and I don't know if it's right, but I got 4 opposition. That's not right.
Well, that's the one that you.
That's the one I gave the answer. It's attributive because we hadn't covered it yet. So so powerful word. You see that? Word of power is powerful word.
So that's going to end up being word by his powerful word.
Yeah. So the of him that's going to be possessive.
Yep.
So his power. The word of his power, so then the whole thing would be his powerful word. But he didn't use powerful, he used word of power, which means it's a little bit stronger, right? If you use a genitive as an adjective, instead of just putting an adjective there, then you're making a stronger statement.
Well, would there be
an adjective powerful? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He could have said powerful, he just using an adjective, but instead he said word of the power because he wanted to make it strong.
Would that be the same form of dunamos or whatever, but in an attributive? Is that the way it works, or would it be a totally different Greek word for that?
It would be the same root, but a slightly different word. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on that one? All right. How about purification of sins?
That's confusing.
I put reference.
Okay. Purification specifically of sins.
Yes.
Okay.
That's good.
Anybody else get anything different?
Could be partitive.
No, I don't think it's part of it, because then sins is a big category and purification is one part of it.
I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like it should be, but it's not. So reference is the other way around.
Reference.
Yep. Okay.
Well, you know what? What I got actually was objective genitive on this, because purification implies purifying, the act of purifying, and the sins are what get purified. So the action is happening to the sins; they're getting purified. So I put down objective genitive on that one. But it could reference could work. Either way, it comes out meaning the same thing. He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty. Modifying hand.
I put
Right hand.
Possessive.
Possessive. The
Yes.
Majesty's hand. A hand belonging to the Majesty.
I guess it's not, that's not right. It'd be like God's hand, Majesty. So,
That's
Yeah.
what I put two. Sure.
Was two?
Because yeah.
yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I was trying to okay.
So what you're saying is
majesty
Majesty is a figure of speech you put for God. It's really talking about God, because
Yeah, it's
the
really
right hand
God,
of
right.
someone, and so it's God's right hand,
God's right hand.
and so it's possessive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's what I got. That one's a little tricky because Majesty doesn't seem like a person, but it's put for a person here.
Yeah, it's capitalized.
Well,
So I was like, okay.
well, but in other translations it says God versus Majesty on high. Majesty on high is actually
a literal
formal way to say it.
Yeah. It's a euphemism.
But, yeah.
Okay, back up to James 1:18. Congratulations on going above and beyond and doing homework, by the way. Oh, wait, let's look at your, what do you got?
If you're up for it,
We'll give it a shot.
1 Timothy 4:14.
All right.
This
1
one says
Timothy
it just scrambled my
4,
brain because I was 4:14.
Okay. All right. Do not neglect.
The spiritual gift within you, which was bestowed on you.
Okay, so let's take it slow here. So, so this is not, this first word not, may. A malay is to neglect, and that's a verb, and it's a command. So do not neglect, that's what that's saying. And then the in you gift. Okay, do not neglect the in you gift.
And that was the other thing that made it hard. I was trying to piece the words in order so I could kind of figure out, and it just.
So this is the genitive is, see, this the is the genitive.
Yeah. Okay.
And the
mark that as the genitive.
Gift is genitive. So it's talking about the gift, but in between there, it's letting you know what gift, and this is in you, which is going to be dative. So let's just kind of forget about in you, so we can think clearly here. The gift, genitive. Do not neglect of the gift. That's one we haven't covered yet. It's a because that, what does that sound like? It sounds like the part of speech that sounds like would be a direct object, right? You is the subject. You don't neglect what? The gift. Sounds like it's the object of the verb. So it sounds like it should be in the accusative case, not genitive.
Right.
But when you, every once in a while, when you would normally expect something to be the accusative, you'd expect it to be a direct object. Instead of using the accusative case, they use a genitive, and we call that the genitive of direct object genitive. Let's see, something like that. Yeah, direct object. So I don't think we were going to cover this in the class, but sometimes the genitive is just it just functions as a direct object. Stop touching me. It doesn't. You'd think that should be accusative. That should be a regular direct object, but it's stop touching of me. So every once in a while, the Greek just does that. They just make it like that. So that's an example of a direct object genitive. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So do not neglect the in you gift, which, and this is the word give here, he gave to you through the prophecy or prophetic utterance. Now this is a genitive.
Right.
So that's a genitive following a preposition.
Yeah, true.
So on my advice in this class was, whenever you have a genitive that's a genitive because it follows a preposition, and the preposition dia takes a genitive, when that happens, then you're better off to look up the word dia, look up the preposition in a lexicon, and figure out the meaning from that instead of trying to identify the genitive. So, in fact, there is one kind of genitive that's called after certain prepositions. That's what's called. After certain prepositions. So, which is not helpful at all. So I mean, here's a lexicon right here. I know this is tiny print. Maybe you can't read, but here it says dia is a preposition, and then this first set of definitions is with the genitive. That's what this says right here, with the genitive. And then down here it's with the accusative. So sometimes dia takes an accusative, sometimes it takes a genitive. If it takes a genitive, then it can be spatial, which is through or by the way of, or it can be temporal, as talking about time, throughout a period of time or within a period of time or something like that, or an interval of time after. Or it can be modal, like the mode, manner, through or in or with, or among, in spite of, different kinds of modal. Or causal, that it is causes something on the basis of, on account of, through, by means of, by the agency of. So those are the four possibilities according to this lexicon, Freiberg. So let's see if we can figure it out. So it says, it was bestowed on you through the prophetic utterance. So the gift was given through prophetic utterance. So was we going to say spatial? No, it's not talking about a location. Is it temporal? During the no. So 3, modal, through, in, with, among, in spite of, not really. Causal, yeah, the efficient cause, in consequence of, on the basis of, on account of, or here, B, of the immediate agent, through, by the agency of, That's really what it is. It's through the agency of the prophetic utterance. That's how you got your gift.
So, okay.
So what I would do is now. So I think looking at these 4 definitions of dia, I'm saying the only one that works is this the causal sense of dia, through, by means of. You got the gift by means of the prophetic utterance. That's what it means. So the genitive is whichever one matches that, and there is one. It's called the cause, the genitive of cause. Or, well, there's also a modal one, but I'm not even going to waste the brain cells to figure out which one it is because that looking up that dia tells me what the phrase means.
So what it's saying is that he got prophecy, or he got his spiritual gift because of a prophecy. Prophecy itself
was the means by which he got the gift. Yeah.
So without the prophetic utterance, he would not have had the spiritual gift.
Right. Now, if actually you can't pin it down that tightly just because of the word dia, because we could say that it's temporal. You got the gift at the time of the prophetic utterance.
I think that.
You know, so that leaves a little. That's not so specific. That leaves it a little more general. It's like, remember when you had the prophetic utterance? That's when you got your gift. And it could be that it was because of the prophetic utterance, or there's a host of things that happen all at once right then. You know?
Well, if you continue on with that, I think it might be going that way in that verse. If you continue the next.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that's more general.
All right,
The whole rest is pretty much all general.
We'll just keep going here. All right, so through the prophetic utterance, with or through. Now this is another preposition, meta, that takes the genitive, so we're going to look up meta, through the laying on of hands. So meta, with the genitive, that's the first set of meanings here, of place, or of accompaniment together with, or of close association, or of aid or help, or of hostility or conflict against, or of as closely connecting two concepts.
It's going to be of aid or help.
As, let's see, number 7, as denoting attendant circumstance with or 8 as indicating means, by means of. Yeah, 8 different uses of meta with the genitive. So
4 or 8.
Now I forgot what he's even talking about.
With the laying on of hands.
This is a prophetic.
Prophetic utterance with the laying on of hands.
With the laying on of hands. Yeah, it could be attendant circumstance. Attendant circumstance means just what was going on at the same moment. Or it could be means that it was through the laying on of hands. So that doesn't help us pin it down either. It could be either one of those. We're just going to have to do more study to figure it out.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So with a...
It's been brought it up.
Well, it's nice to know what your options are at the beginning. With the laying on of hands, because if attendant circumstance wasn't one of the definitions, then we wouldn't have to be messing with that. So it's nice to know what we're the possibilities are. So with the laying on of hands of the so the laying on of the hands. So the laying on of the hands. What kind of genitive is that one?
Possessive, isn't it? Hands of the
hands of the people.
Elders, or
I think no. The next one is possessive.
Yeah.
The hands of the elders. Of the elders is possessive
Yes.
because it's the elders' hands. But with the laying on of the hands, so the laying on is being modified. Of the hands is modifying the laying on. So what is the relationship between laying on and of the hands?
It might just be source from you.
Laying on is the hands are the source of the laying on. I don't think I wouldn't pick source.
Possessive, no. Laying, lays. Place, characterize, lay. Oh, would it be telic?
Laying on for the purpose of hands?
Attributed? Hands are doing the laying on.
Yeah, hands are not.
Handsy laying on.
No, okay. I don't know.
Yeah. We can throw that out. I'm sure we could guess more, but that position.
I had my mic off the whole time. Thanks, Darrell, for letting me know that. Okay, well, here we go with the mic now. All right, we'll start from the top. All right, any guesses? Or we stumped on that one?
I'm stumped.
How about if you look at objective or subjective genitive, which one of those would you, if it had to be one of those two, which one would it be? So the laying on, that implies an action, right? Like the action of laying on. So if the genitive, is it happening to the genitive, or is it the genitive that's doing the action?
The hands are going on, so it's going to be the genitive is doing the action.
So the genitive is doing the action, which would make it what?
Subjective.
Subjective genitive. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I agree. Nice job. so I'd call that a subjective. You know, subjective and objective genitives they're the hardest ones. They're just the hardest ones. You don't never think of them, but that's what I would call that one. And then the hands of the elders, that's possessive. So to answer your question, this whole string of genitives, in this case, every one of them referred to the word right before it. So, okay.
So did we, and it didn't really help us, to figure out what was the catalyst for the spiritual gift. Was it the laying on of the hands of the elders, or was it the prophecy that was given along also with the laying of the hands? And do you need both? You need one? You need...
It seems to me, now this is apart from the discussion of Greek genitives, but it seems to me Timothy was a special case. It was a real special case where he got his gift in some special incident with the apostles. And that he got it through that laying on of hands. But I don't know of any other place in Scripture that indicates that anybody would get a gift that way. So he just sounds to me like a special case. I'm going to quick run and grab a different mic.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting study, because I thought Acts, almost all the times they had the tongues, it was on after the laying on of hands.
Right.
And it was like, okay, well, then that brings up a question of apostolic succession and all that stuff. What if there's...
And
I was just hoping to apply what I'm learning to this person. Like, what? Ow!
Well,
I don't want to take a more time.
No, that's good, and you know, this will help you even on these ones where it doesn't end up being as specific as you would have hoped. Still, it enables you to be on your guard. If you hear some preacher say, "Oh, it has to mean such and such because it's a genitive," and you're like, "Wait a minute, it could be this genitive or this genitive or this genitive." That doesn't, you know, so. So at least you're getting a feel for how language works, and even if you're not able to just identify genitives real easily, this class will help you, just because by the time we're done with it, you'll have a much better feel for how language works and how specific you can be, and how much context is determinative.
Well, years ago I was just given the impression that the Greek was a very exact language, and that's one of the reasons why Jesus came at this point, so there'd be less, and it's like the more I try to learn it, it's like, I don't think it's that specific.
It doesn't seem as specific as you'd hoped.
Yeah.
You're right, but all you have to do is study Hebrew. And as soon as you study Hebrew, you'll say, Greek is so specific. Because Hebrew, pretty much anything can mean anything, I mean, the lamed, the letter lamed, the letter L in Hebrew is a preposition, and it can be pretty much mean anything. There's somebody there's one guy who wrote a doctoral dissertation on the letter L, just because it could mean anything. I mean, it's frustrating in Hebrew trying to pin things down when you're used to Greek. So it is very specific, but it's just not. No language is that specific to where context doesn't matter. So.
Well, and it doesn't say. I mean, just going through Corinthians 14 right now with D.A. Carson, it's like it still doesn't delineate what Paul was thinking when he said it.
Yeah.
You just don't know for sure.
That's right. If Danelle, if you're still watching, can you? I don't know if this mic is any better now, or if it's worse, then you can't even tell that I'm asking the question. But is this any better? She's not responding. Okay. Well, we'll see if this. All right. Well, let's go to James 1:18. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth. Of truth. Which one is that?
Well, again, it could be attributive.
Okay, it could be attributive. True word. Anything else?
Is it possible it could be subjective? Truth produced the word?
Truth. Well, the word, no, because the word would have to imply some action.
Okay.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it a word.
I like
the truth.
reference, because it's specifically talking about not just any word, but the word of truth.
Okay, so word is a big category, but it gets narrowed down to specifically the word of truth, not just any word. So reference, okay. Anything else?
Can you do apposition?
Word, namely
is
truth. It could be, yeah, through the word, namely truth.
To give birth through the word. Now,
there is something that, Jerry, were you the one that just said subjective?
Mm-hmm.
So what about, remember, a subset of subjective is product.
And that's why I said produce.
And then, yeah, so that's why Wallace came up with this product and production, because they don't quite fit objective and subjective, but they're in that same category. But I put down product as a possibility. Truth produces, or truth is the word. Truth produces the word, right? Truth is where this word comes from, the body of truth. And then the other possibility that I put down was just description. Maybe he didn't mean this to be very limited in scope. He just meant to associate the word with truth generally. Oh, the sound is fixed. Okay, good.
No, you said product, which would be number 10, but I was looking at production because isn't the word produced by truth?
Oh yeah, yeah. I meant production.
Okay.
I get them mixed up. Sorry.
Right.
Right. Production, not product. Yeah. Okay. So he chose to give us word through the. And did we talk about attributive? It could be attributive, the true
Yes.
word.
Write
Okay.
that up
All right.
first.
Okay. So to me, I think if I had to pick one, this was kind of hard, but if I had to pick one, I think I would put description. I think it's just kind of general, word connected with truth. But yeah, I'm not dogmatic about that. Anyway, he chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits.
I would say it could be partitive.
Okay,
Just
partitive.
looking at it.
So partitive of the first fruits. So explain why you're saying partitive.
Because first fruits is the whole, and kind of, the word kind is just a subset. But maybe that doesn't work. For
No, it does. I think you're right. You're right. The first fruits is the big category, and we being a kind of that is limiting it. I mean, it's narrowing it down. It's a little weird because the word kind, but that's what I put was partitive.
So you're right.
We might be one little part within the first fruits is basically what that means. And I didn't put a line, I didn't underline of all he created, but why don't we do that one? That's a genitive too. First fruits of all he created.
So creators. First fruits.
Well, I would still say wouldn't it still be production because he is the first fruits is produced by him. He created it.
Let's translate it. The first fruits of his creatures. It's really of the creatures of him. The of him is going to be possessive, right? His creatures. So first fruits among his creatures. So if we...
Well, that would be possessive then.
Well, the of him is possessive. But the creatures, of the creatures of him, so the of him is possessive, but the creatures, first fruits of the creatures. To me, that seems like that's partitive too. So you get the creatures, all the creatures that he created is one big thing, and then the first fruits is a subset of that, is a smaller category of that, and then the kind is a smaller group within that, right?
See that?
Yeah.
I'm kind of going off the top of my head here. I didn't really think this through, but yeah, that kind of seems like it would be. All right, let's move on. Hebrews 12:15. See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness. Okay, this one. I want to spend a little time on this one. In fact, if you have your Bible, go ahead and look at Hebrews 12:15. Because this one is a verse that is frequently taken differently than I take it.
You did this during what? One of the classes, maybe? The root of bitterness?
We talked about root of bitterness probably in hermeneutics or something.
Yeah.
Could be. It's kind of a soapbox for me. But we'll see here. So you already know my take on it, I suppose. Hebrews 12:15. And if you look at it in your Bible, then you'll see, I guess it's not obvious in my Bible, but this is a quotation. This phrase, root of bitterness, comes from Deuteronomy 29:18.
That's what Hebrews does.
Now, the NIV translates it bitter root. So how is the NIV taking this? What kind of genitive is the NIV taking it? Bitter root, when he says root of bitterness.
Attributive.
Yeah, they're calling it an attributive, right? Attributive genitive. Now, when you hear, what else comes to your mind? When you hear, if you've heard preachers talk about the root of bitterness, how have you heard that interpreted typically?
That some object is creating bitterness in you. It's
Right.
the cause of that.
Right. So the root of bitterness is talking about the root is bitterness. You're full of bitterness. If we take it that way, then what kind of genitive would it be?
Subjective. Well, or if you want to go production.
Production.
Okay, or even apposition, right? The root, namely bitterness. The root equals bitterness.
Okay.
See to that you have a root of bitterness. Usually whenever I hear someone quote this verse and they talk about a root of bitterness, when they say root of bitterness, they just mean bitterness, right? That works like a root. So root, namely bitterness. They take it as apposition. That's the way I always hear this used. Genitive of apposition, the root, which is bitterness. So he's talking about, the thing he's talking about is bitterness. If we take it as an attributive, like the NIV takes it, then what he's talking about is a root, which happens to be bitter, but it's a root, a crummy tasting root. So those are two totally different meanings. If we look it up in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 29:18, you have a situation going on here, so I'll read from verse 16. You yourselves know how we lived in Egypt and how we passed through the countries on the way there. You saw among them their detestable images and idols of wood and stone, of silver and gold. Make sure there is no man or woman, clan or tribe among you today whose heart turns away from the Lord our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Make sure there is no root among you that produces such bitter poison. Make sure there's no, so the bitter poison is a root producing a poison. And what is the root that produces poison? It's some person that leads people away from God. So a bitter root is a root that's just so horrible, so bitter tasting, so crummy, because it leads people away from God. So it's talking about a root. So if you look at that as a context, then you go back to Hebrews 12. It says, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, and that no bitter root springing up causes trouble and defiles many. That's talking about the same thing. Some person that comes along and defiles people and pulls them away from God. Make sure that doesn't happen among you. Don't get one of those bitter roots, those Deuteronomy 29 bitter roots. So it's talking about a root. It's not talking about usually people quote that verse and they'll say, oh, it's talking about, bitterness is like a root that grows up and spreads out. And, that has nothing to do with the context. Now, bitterness is kind of like that. I think that's why that interpretation caught on, because bitterness is definitely like that. Like starts out and it grows and it builds and flourishes and spreads and everything. But this isn't talking about bitterness. It's talking about people who influence folks to move away from God. And those people in Deuteronomy are called bitter roots. They're called roots that have a bitter effect. And so that's what it's talking about. So all that to say, context tells me that this is not apposition, it's attributive.
So, sorry, I'm going to back up here. Like, it says, see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God. So that would be, yeah, would that still be, would that be a genitive?
Grace of God, short of the grace of God. So of God, that's possessive, right? God's grace. Short of the grace, we'll see that, Hebrews 12:15.
So grace is.
Let's see, so no one comes. So watch out. No one comes short of the grace. And that's a genitive, but it's coming off of a preposition. Appa. So we'd want to look up appa and see what possible meanings there are.
It's really, we want to look up the prepositions for any genitive that follows.
Yep. So, but this one, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on it because it's kind of obvious to me what it means. Come short of the grace. That is just exactly like it sounds. You're not reaching the grace. So, okay. Let's move on to Ephesians 4:9. Does everybody understand what I was saying about Hebrews 12:15, or was that convoluted?
No, I understand.
Got it? Okay. All right.
Go away with it being attributive, right? Or not attributive, apposition. That's what you said.
No, I'm saying not opposition. So
I'm confused.
But don't tell some preacher that it's attributive, or it'll cause a root of bitterness in him. Okay. Ephesians 4:9. The lower parts of the earth. This is a really interesting one, I think.
Okay, I'll bite them. If it's interesting, means it's not the obvious. To me, it would be destination. Wait a minute.
No, because it's modifying parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right.
It's partitive.
Partitive. So the parts of the earth that are down low. The earth, if it's partitive, the earth is the big category, and then the parts those lower parts are a subset of that. So that would be partitive. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the idea of you got the earth, and then down below, that part of the earth is what's being referenced. Okay, so it could be partitive. It's a possibility. Some people take it that way. Anything else? Some people interpret this to mean the lower parts, which is the earth. So there's the whole, the everything, and Jesus was in heaven, and then he went from heaven down to the lower parts, which is the earth. So this is talking about not him dying. This isn't talking about him dying. This is talking about the incarnation. This is talking about Christmas, when he went from heaven down to earth and became a man in the incarnation. So if we interpret the verse that way, what kind of genitive would of the earth be?
What would that be? Would it be apposition?
Namely, yeah, which is genitive of apposition, right. So it could be, depending on how you interpret the verse, lower parts, namely the earth, or lower parts of the earth, which is down one part of the earth. Or one other possibility, parts that are lower than the earth. So if you have parts that are lower than the earth, so now it's not even talking about the earth, it's down in hell, it's down below the whole earth. If that's what it's talking about, then what kind of genitive would it be?
Going to reference.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
It's one of the ones we covered today.
Yeah.
I was looking at destination.
Attributive?
No.
Destination? Yeah. That sounds.
Well, I didn't see it being telic or comparison.
Telic, would it be?
Not comparison. Lower than.
Yeah, okay.
Lower than.
Oh.
See, lower is a comparative word. There's low and then there's lower. So lower than the earth. If we talk about something that's under the earth, then it would be comparison, lower than the earth. If it's some part of the earth, then it's part of it. If it's from heaven to earth, then it's apposition. So.
And which one are you going with?
I think when I studied Ephesians 4, I'm pretty sure I came up with interpretation that's talking about him coming from heaven down to the earth. So apposition.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't that be destination also?
You
said to the earth. Well, lower parts to the earth. Never mind.
Yeah, because it's modifying parts, not Jesus. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Romans 15:13. Now may the God of hope.
This is only what I'm going to get today. Product, only because it's.
Right. So Colton is dogmatic. This is genitive of product, and don't argue.
God of hope, you got it. Yeah, perfect.
So God produces a hope, right? It could be source, but oh no, that would be the other way around. Yeah, product. Okay. Yep, product. Anybody?
You always get the ones in the notes.
Well, there's another possibility though. It could be description, because it could be, he's saying that hope comes from God, or it could be saying, God is described by hope. And since he is a God that's characterized by hope in general, then he's also later on in the verse where you're going to get hope. So it could potentially be description, but I think product is probably best. All right.
Description would be good too.
Yeah, I think it's possible description. May the God of hope. So description makes it so you're not limiting it. God is just connected with hope,
Right.
in a lot of ways, and so maybe that's what Paul had in mind.
Especially context on that too. Romans 15:12, and he's talking about the hope of the Gentiles. And then he goes on to say, now may the God of hope gives you peace and joy.
Okay, so you're saying that lends itself to
Description.
Product.
The verse 12, the context of verse 12, since he's the hope of the Gentiles, lends itself to product. Okay, yeah. All right, so may the God of hope fill you of joy and peace.
Well, what's the opposite of acquisition?
Reference.
Telic.
Yes. Purpose.
I'll give you a hint. Look at focus on the word fill. Usually you wouldn't say fill you of something, right? What would you say? Fill you with, right? So when you fill something with something, which one is that? Content, yeah. Content.
So
when you fill something with something, that's genitive of content. It's a tricky one because we just hit it today and we haven't worked on it. So yeah, I would put that content on that one. Fill you with not water, not sand, but joy and peace. Okay. Let's see. So to fill you with joy and peace in believing, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit.
Production.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, it's production. Subjective or objective.
It could also be possessive, it would appear.
Oh, those are the two. What did you say? Possessive, yeah. Either possessive or production. So either this power is coming from the Spirit, or you could put source. I would say source instead of production, because it's not that he's producing the power as much as it's coming from the Spirit, that he's a source of it. So I would say either source, power coming from the Spirit, or the Holy Spirit's power, the possession. So how would we decide between those two? The power that belongs to the Spirit, or the power that comes from the Spirit? And the way to decide between those two is you try to think of the writer of this verse. When Paul's penning this, is it more likely that he's trying to emphasize the source of this power, or trying to emphasize who it belongs to? And
Source.
For me, I would, just knowing Paul and how he talks about the Spirit, I would land on source. Maybe if I studied it more thoroughly, I might land on possessive, but to me it seems more likely that he's trying to emphasize where this power came from more than who owns it. So I think I would put source.
Even in the case where, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing. And that believing is what's producing that. By your believing, you access the power. Right?
Yeah. It'd be a lot of fun if we were in this class on datives to look at the in believing and see what that means. But yeah, so not a huge amount of difference to the Holy Spirit's power or power from the Spirit. Obviously, it means pretty much the same, but just slightly different. All right, James 2:4. Have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges of thoughts? Oops. Don't look. All right, now what do you think it is? I think myself do that every single week, at least once. Who can tell me why I put attributive on this one?
2 for 2.
Yeah.
When Colton is dogmatic on something, then he's cheating. So tell me why I put attributive. Judges of thoughts.
Thoughts.
I'll give you a hint. That was a typo. I have no idea why attributive is in there. It is not attributive. Thoughtsy judges? No. So I don't know.
Thoughtful judges? So nice judges?
Thoughtful judges? Yeah, I don't think so.
2 for 2.
Rating on it.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start putting wrong ones in here. Then I'll know when you're cheating. All right, so judges of thoughts. It's kind of a strange phrase, isn't it?
I think it's because had Luke 18 in there, and the judge of justice, and that judge,
Well, I would think that would be
reference.
Judges with reference to thoughts. Judges, not just any judges, but the thoughts ones. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, because I was like, judges with respect to thoughts.
Oh, judges specifically with respect to thoughts. You become judges not in every way, but in your thoughts.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. All right. You just become judges specifically with thoughts. I don't think it's possible, but I think there's a better one.
You might go with reference.
Okay, that's what
you're judging. You're specifically judging in respect to
that's
what their thoughts are.
That's what he was just.
I was sorry with
reading so much I wasn't listening.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Objective. So the judges
Yeah.
are judging and the thoughts are getting judged.
Or is it subjective?
Yeah, well, yeah. They're the direct object. Of thoughts is the direct object.
I don't think so. I don't think they're judging the thoughts. The judges are actually having these thoughts.
Do you think if the judges are having these thoughts?
Well, that would depend on what genitive you go with, isn't it?
No, I think they're for sure having these thoughts. You would become judges. I see what you're saying. If you're judging the thoughts, it sounds in English. If you just use the word "of," it sounds like you're judging the thoughts,
Right.
but that's not what it's talking about. So it's talking about. I mean, all the translations translate it judges with evil thoughts. So these judges are having these thoughts.
So it's not really of.
I'm sorry, I should have given you the context up front.
It's of evil. Okay. Judges.
Was the thing to be attributed in that one again?
Well, I think you're looking at the evil. Evil is attributive. I would call of thoughts of evil, evil thoughts. That's attributive. So yeah, the of evil genitive is attributive genitive. But judges of thoughts is what we're.
Content again?
Content. Yeah.
No,
Judges full of thoughts.
With thoughts. Or evil. Where's the evil?
I want to say this.
It's the thoughts of evil.
Oh, okay.
I would be willing to go with descriptive because your judges
Might be one.
and your judges that have evil thoughts.
Well,
The NASB says judges with evil
Right.
motives.
Well, how about this? So where are the thoughts coming from?
From the judges.
So if we identified it along that line, these thoughts are coming from the judges.
Producing.
Yeah, or source. I put source. Judges of thoughts. Wait a minute, source.
Source would be their own.
Oh, right. So that's the wrong direction because source would mean the thoughts are producing the judges. So it would be production.
Yeah, because the judges are producing the thoughts.
No, product.
Yeah, product.
Product.
Yeah,
The thoughts are produced by the judges.
Judges of thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's probably product.
Judges, which produce the
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah,
I'm going
product.
to put here CNASB because that helps me out.
Okay, good. All right, let's get off of James 2:4. Galatians 5:16. So I say, live by the Spirit, you will not gratify the desires of the flesh.
Well, you skipped of evil, though.
Yes.
Oh yeah, well we of evil was attributive. I mentioned that was attributive. So
So
evil
it is
thoughts.
attributed.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go back.
No, that's all right. Yeah. So of evil thoughts attributive.
Is it product again?
Of the flesh,
Of the flesh.
product. So the desires, the flesh is producing the desires.
Yeah. I like that.
That's wouldn't that be production? Wait a minute. Yeah, that'd be production. The genitive produces the desires. The flesh produces the desires. So you're saying production. That's a possibility.
So it's description, right? Yeah.
Description. Okay, just connected to the flesh. Desires that are associated with flesh. Yeah, it could definitely be that.
Could be possessive.
Could be apposition, possibly. Desires being the.
Desires, which are the flesh? I don't think so. I think the flesh is more than just desires. But I do think it could potentially be attributive. Fleshy kinds of desires. Desires, that's real close to what Mom said, description,
Right.
characterized by the flesh.
So it's not possessive.
The flesh's desires, it could be possessive, yeah.
But I mean, theologically, though, I mean, that would basically be saying, like, flesh is what's wrong. It really, flesh in of itself is.
No, well, it is. Flesh in Galatians, flesh is what's wrong. Because he's not when he says flesh, he's not talking about matter. He's talking about the sinful part of you.
Right. Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so that one could be a few different ones. But yeah, it could be possession. I think it's possible. The flesh's
I
desires.
like production.
Production? You going with that?
I'm going to
All
stick with that. Because
Stick with it.
It's also talking about living by the Spirit, and he's contrasting the two. Right?
Okay, yeah, right. And the Spirit generates the good
Yeah.
things, so this flesh generates the bad stuff. Yeah, I think that's right. Good. Galatians 2:7. On the contrary, they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel of the uncircumcision, just as Peter of the circumcision. So the gospel of the uncircumcision, which is a way of referring to Gentiles. Peter was entrusted to Paul was entrusted with that, while Peter was entrusted to the one to the Jews of the circumcision.
What it's inferred on Peter, that's still Peter's gospel. It's not, the genitive is not doing Peter, it's again the gospel.
Right, so that second one is an example of an ellipsis figure of speech that I mentioned last time where they leave some words out. But yeah, if you fill in those missing words that are implied, it would say, on the contrary, they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel of the circumcision, just as Peter was entrusted with the gospel of the circumcision. And this one a case where the genitive is referring to some words that aren't even there. They're just implied.
Okay.
So, yeah. So both genitives are modifying the word gospel.
Is it reference?
Okay, gospel with reference to the Gentiles, with reference to the Jews.
In respect to.
I think it could be, but I think we can get more specific than that.
Concerning.
Look at the ones we studied today, since those are not going to be the first ones that come to mind. Let's look at those first. So we started with attributive, right? So let's just run through them. Attributive, the gospel, the Gentile gospel. No, I don't know. That's clumsy. Destination, the gospel to the Gentiles, gospel to the Jews. You guys like that one?
I like that.
You like it? Okay. Telic, gospel for the purpose. No. Comparison, gospel than the. No, it doesn't work at all. Content, gospel of. No. Yeah, I think you're right. Destination. And that's how the NIV takes it. Gospel to the Gentiles, gospel to the Jews.
So destination doesn't actually have to be physical.
No, it can be. And remember, when we went over the definition, it said that. I thought it said it could be.
No, that's the
figurative. Oh, that was a different one.
That's content.
But right, but destination doesn't have to be literal.
So both of those genitives are 13, or yeah.
Yeah, destination. Yeah. Okay. One more. Romans 9:22. What if God, choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of wrath? One more, but it's a really hard one. This is one of those ones where it could be different genitive depending on your interpretation of the verse.
Description, do you want?
Description. Yeah, objects associated generally with wrath. Yeah, okay, that's a possibility. Telic. So, tell me why you're thinking telic.
Because the objects, patience, the objects for wrath.
Objects for wrath. Yeah.
Denotes the purpose for which the modified word. So the modified word is objects, and the purpose of those objects is wrath. Okay, now that What are we saying theologically? If we take it as a telic, then we're saying these people were created for the purpose of suffering wrath. I mean, you don't want to. You don't. It's not going to be a popular thing to preach, but that you gotta acknowledge that as a possibility in that context. You gotta acknowledge that as a possible interpretation.
And since my wife happened to suggest a church, and I looked it up, and it's an emerging church, I think fit right in.
Yeah.
All right. So there's our ultra reformed interpretation. So what else could it be? See, the reason I say we have to acknowledge that one as a possibility is because look at the verse. He says, what if God, he's trying to explain damnation and election and God choosing some and not choosing others. And he said, what if God, choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience objects created for wrath? He created them for wrath, but he's still being patient with them. You have to acknowledge that as a possibility. But if we don't think that it's that, and that's too harsh for us, then what else are we gonna say? They're objects that are
content full of wrath.
Objects belonging to wrath.
Objects full of wrath. I think we'd need the word full in there for it to be content.
Well, you have replaced the word of, put full of.
Yeah, but I think for genitives of content, the word full is already there. The actual word full is already there.
Oh, okay.
How about from? How about source? Objects from wrath?
Objects that were created by wrath? No, I don't think so. Let's look at the ones from today. So we'll start with attributive. Wrathy objects, no, attributive doesn't work. Destination, objects moving in the direction of or destined for wrath.
Destined for
would work.
Destined for, that one works. Okay. All right, we already talked about telic. Comparison, than wrath, no, there's nothing being compared there. So content of full of wrath, I don't think so. I think it is destination. It's either destination or telic, and I think that destination idea, that's where they're going. They're headed for wrath, and God is being super patient with them.
Right.
If the preacher preached alone on Romans 9, he's going to interpret it just alone. He didn't go through the whole book. It's going to be telic.
It's going to be telic. Well, the guys you hang around.
Yeah.
Whoa.
They'll call it that telic. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be telic, or either way, it's a pretty strong verse. But.
Can we go down to 16? Because
Sure.
You confused me with that. Because you've got, in your underline there, you've got, if it's modifying a noun in place of the word of, in quotes, put full of, in quotes.
Oh, right.
What you're saying, full should.
Yeah, I was wrong. I misstated you. Yeah. Thanks for correcting that.
Okay.
I was thinking that because of the one we did earlier, it did have the word full.
Right.
So if it has the word full, then it's definitely content. But you're right, it doesn't have to have the word full because they came dragging the net of fish. You put the word full. You're right. Thanks for correcting that.
So what are you correcting? I didn't understand.
So in the genitive of content, the very last one is number 16 on the handout. I was saying that the word full already needs to be there in the sentence in order for it to be content, but that's not, none of the examples have that. It's, you're actually supplying the word full. You're replacing the word of with the word full. Jerry asked earlier, could we do that? And I said no, but I gave him the wrong answer.
So there's not, I won't change the wording here. The wording is correct. Your answer from earlier as well.
Yeah, my answer from earlier is that's wrong. So yeah, the handout is correct.
Okay.
So let's go back to, Jerry asked if this one in Romans could be content. Objects full of wrath. Yeah. Okay. So that's technically possible. They're angry objects. So the objects themselves are wrathful. I think without the context of the chapter, that would technically be a possibility. But if you look at the rest of the chapter, even the rest of the verse, what if God, choosing to show his wrath, it seems like the wrath is coming from God onto the objects, not them being man.
I agree with that.
But technically, you're right. It could be. Okay.
So we introduced 2 heretical possibilities, right?
Well, great work, everybody. Great work. You're doing. Your knowledge of Greek genitives right now is phenomenal. It's well beyond most MDiv seminary graduates already at this point, I think. So, so great work, and we'll plug away for a couple more weeks, and by the time we get to the end, I think you're going to have have a really good grasp. So, okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, Norman Laurie told me to tell you to say hi, Darrell.
Oh, okay. Yeah, tell them.
They're I guess they're moving back to Littleton. Berkeley, yeah.
Don't they like Berkeley?
Lauren's dad is in a hospital or having some troubles with his health, and so he was up there for a job, and they thought they were going to get there permanently, but they've been just driving back, I think, back and forth for the last year or so, and yeah, so they're moving back.